Okay, this lesson is on solving quadratic inequalities. You know, our quadratics have these forms. There's an x squared involved. And of course, inequalities are less than or equal to, greater than, or greater than or equal to. So problems are going to look like this. And we're going to be doing inequality, which means we're going to be shading lines, but it's not as easy or straightforward as regular inequalities. The first thing we're going to have to do is factor. We're going to have to factor the quadratic and solve for x. So this goes back to what we were doing previously, chapter 1. Alright, then we're going to, once we figure out solve for x, we're going to draw a number line, and put those numbers themselves on the number line. Once we mark those two numbers off on the number line, we're going to draw vertical lines through those numbers and split it into regions. It'll make more sense when I actually do a few problems. Now, within these regions, what we're going to do is choose what we call a test value. And we're going to use this test value and something called a sign chart to help us shade the number line. Now, let me start with some simple ones. I'm going to do something that's already been factored. Let's say we have x minus 3, x plus 4. I want to be greater than 0. Now, what this is telling me, I want to multiply two numbers together and I want it to be positive. I want it to be greater than 0. So the first thing we do is we're going to take each one of these and we're going to solve for x. Just like we normally solve for x, we'll get x to be 3 and x to be negative 4. Now, let's draw a number line, put the negative 4, positive 3, and draw vertical lines through them. Or as close as you can get. Once we do the numbers and we draw the vertical lines, we're going to choose a number within that region. On this left side, I need a number that's less than negative 4. So, I always use the smallest numbers I can. So I'm going to use negative 5 as my test value. I'm going to circle it because that's my test value. I want to choose a number in between negative 4 and positive 3. If you can, always use 0. That's easy. I'm going to choose a number on the right side of 3 as my test value. I guess we'll use 4. Now, here's where the sign chart comes into play, why it's called a sign chart. I'm trying to determine if I get a positive or a negative number, hence the sign chart. What I'm going to do with these test values is I'm going to plug them in right here. Let me undo that thing. You're going to plug test values in. I'm going to highlight that in here. We're literally going to plug them in the factored part. Now here's what it's going to look like. We'll have, this is where the signs come in. We'll have negative 5 minus 3, negative 5 plus 4. When we simplify that, we'll get negative 8 and negative 1. When we simplify that, we'll get a positive 8. Now, we said earlier, this must be positive. The number I get when I do this substitution must be positive. Well, guess what? That's a positive number. That means this is the region I shade. My test value generated a positive number, and that's what we were looking for, so I shade that part that gave me the positive number. Let's do the 0, show you what happens. So we're going to have 0 minus 3, 0 plus 4. So if I plug 0 in, we'll get what? Negative 3 times positive 4, which gives me a negative 12. Well, up front, this says I need a positive number. This test value gave me a negative number. So what we do in that situation, we would cross out this whole region and don't shade anything. Anything between negative 4 and the 3 will generate a negative number. We want it to be positive. All right, let's take the 4, do the same thing. 4 minus 3. Whoops. Let me erase that. I'll do it a little better. 4 minus... Oh, sorry. Hold on. Undo that. Go back to that. Undo that. All right, so we're going to have 4 minus 3. 4 plus 4. That's going to give me positive 4. Well, again, I'm looking for positive, so that means anything in this region we shade. Now this goes back to where we were doing the union symbols and things like that. Since this graph is shaded to the left of a number and to the right of a number, it kind of goes back to the domain things. It's going to have a union symbol in it. On the left, it's pointing toward negative infinity, and I've got a negative 4 on the left, so we're going to put these two numbers as part of my answer. Now, since it's a greater than without the bracket, these are going to be parentheses. So we're still doing the same thing we've done in the past. It's just now we have to do, when we had the OR problems and the AND problems and things like that, we're going to be shading, writing the shaded region down using this interval notation. All right, I'm going to do another one before we have to factor. Let's say I had x times x minus 7 less than or equal to 0. Okay. Now this goes back a little ways. Because there's an x in front of the parentheses, one of my answers is always 0. This goes back to chapter 2. I mean, not chapter 2, chapter 1. And we take this and solve for x. So we've got two numbers for x, 0 and 7. Now, draw my number line. Put the 0 on the 7 on the number line. And draw my vertical lines. And now we're going to choose test values. This time I can't choose 0 because 0 is one of the answers. I mean, one of the x's. So I'm going to choose negative 1. I'm going to choose positive 1. And I'm going to choose positive 8. Notice this time we want it to be a negative number because we're less than 0. So we're going to take each of those each of those test values, and we're going to plug them in right here. Plug in, whoops. Plug in test value. Alright, so if we put negative 1 in, we're going to have negative 1 in front. Then negative 1 minus 7. It's going to give me negative 1 times negative 8. Negative 8. Yeah, negative 8. Negative 8 times negative 1 is positive 8. Well, we need it to be negative. This is a positive number. So what that tells me based on that is that this will not work. If I put 1 in, let's see what happens. we'll get 1 minus 7. So we'll get 1 times negative 6, which is negative 6. Now, up front, we said my answer needed to be a negative. When I plug 1 in, I get a negative. So that means I shade in between those two pieces. Now let's check the other one. Let's put 8 in the into the parentheses. So we'll go 8 times 8 minus 7. 8 times 1 is 8. Alright. Well, that's a positive number. I need it to be negative, so since it's not a negative number, we cross this one out. This is the one where it doesn't have the union symbol as the answer. It's the two numbers themselves, the 0 and the 7. They're in between. And this one will have a bracket because it's less than or equal to. So it's a little process you got to go through. Now let's take some and start factoring. Let's say we had x squared minus 7x plus 8. Whoops. We'll do minus 8 greater than or equal to 0. Now, up front, I want you to see that that is going to be positive. I want my answers to generate a positive number. So the first thing we're going to do is factor. We'll get x minus 8, x plus 1. Alright. Solving for x, we get x to be positive 8, x to be negative 1. So put those two numbers on the number line. Negative 1, positive 8. I'm going to draw. Do this. I don't know why. I just don't know. Who knows why I'm using it. Okay, now let's go choose our test values. On this side, we're going to choose negative 2. In the middle, I'm going to choose 0. On this side, I'm going to choose 9. Now, I want us to plug them in right here. In the factored form. So let's plug these in. So we'll have negative 2 minus 8 times negative 2 plus 1. This is going to be negative 10 times negative 1, which is positive 10. Well, up front, I said my answer should be a positive when I plug it in. And guess what? It is definitely positive. So that means I shade on the left side of negative 1. Let's put 0 in. 0 minus 8. 0 plus 1. So we're going to get negative 8 times 1, which is negative 8. Well, I need it to be positive, but doing it this way gives me a negative. So that means I cross out this region because it won't work. Nothing in that region will give me a positive number. Now let's take the 9 and plug it in. 9 minus 8. 9 plus 1. We're going to get 1 times 9, which is 9. And notice it's a positive number. So we're going to shade this direction. So I've got two shaded pieces of this graph. It's going to be a union symbol because the middle piece is marked out. Negative infinity to negative 1 on the left side. And because it's greater than or equal to, we put a bracket. We put another bracket. We put the 8. And we put positive infinity. Now let's do some more. Let's say we had x squared plus 5x is less than negative 6. Now notice there's something wrong with this one. It is, let me change that to a positive 6. I don't like that. Positive 6. It's not, I got a 0 on the right side. So just like before when we were doing these things, the quadratics have to have a 0 on the right side. So we've got to move the 6 over, change the sign. Then we're going to factor it. Now, pay attention. We're looking for a negative number this time. When I plug in my test values, I want my answer to be a negative at the end. If it's not a negative, cross that region out. When we factor this, we'll get x minus 6, x plus 1, less than 0. That means x can be positive 6, x will be positive 6, x will be negative 1. Alright, draw my number line. Negative 1, positive 6. For my test values, I am going to choose negative 2, 0, and 7. Now remember, we want to plug them in right here. Alright, so we're going to have negative 2 minus 6 in the first parentheses, negative 2 plus 1 in the second. That gives me negative 8 times negative 1, which is positive 8. My answer needs to be negative. This is definitely not a negative number. So we're going to cross this region out. Will not work. Let's plug the 0 in. We want to get negative 6 times positive 1, which is negative 6. Well, we want our answer to be negative, and guess what? We just found the negative number. So we're going to highlight or shade in what's right in the middle. I'm going to give you a little hint, y'all, so I don't have to do this. This side is not going to work either. It's going to give me a positive number, and we want things to be negative. So my final answer is this. They're both parentheses because it doesn't have the equal to part. Alright, let's do another one. Let's say we have, I don't know, we'll do x squared minus x minus 12 is greater than 0. And we factor this one how many times? Who knows? It's going to be x minus 4, x plus 3. Solving this, we'll get x to be positive 4, x to be negative 3. So my number line, negative 3, positive 4. Choose my test values. Let's use negative 4 for this side, 0 in the middle, and 5 on this side. Now remember, plug them in here. And not only that, but remember, this time we want it to be positive. So I'm looking for my answer to give me positive when I plug it in. So let's take the negative 4 and put it in the parentheses. We'll have negative 4 minus 4, negative 4 plus 3. That's going to get, I don't know where that minus, that's going to give me minus 4. We'll get negative 8 times negative 1, which is positive 8. Well, okay, that's what we wanted, right? So we're going to shade this region. Let's put the 0 in and see what happens. 0 minus 4, 0 plus 3. That gives me negative 4 times 3, which is negative 12. That's not positive. I want it to be positive, but it's negative, so we're going to cross this region out. Then let's check this side. We're going to put the 5 in for x. 5 minus 4. 5 plus 3. 1 times 8, which is 8, which is positive. So we shade this one. So on this one, my final answer will have the union symbol. We'll have negative infinity on the left and negative 3. Because that's the number here. Use those numbers when you're in your answer. And then 4, positive infinity. Whoops. This is the final answer. Whoops. Well, that's the final answer. This first one of it, I'll do one more. Let's say we have 2x squared minus 5x minus 3 less than or equal to 0. Now, some of these you may have to do the slide and divide method on, and you just never know. I'm going to go ahead and factor it. Don't have to worry about it. Minus 3 plus 1. Okay. When we solve this one, we get negative 1/2. Solving this one, we'll get positive 3. So on the number line, we're going to put negative 1/2 and positive 3. Now, look up here. This time we want it to be negative, right? So we want to take a test number, plug it in, and we get a negative answer. Well, I guess for my test value, I'm going to use negative 1. In the middle, I'm going to choose 0. And on this side, I'm going to choose 4. So let's go plug those in and see what we come up with. So we're going to have negative 2 plus 1 minus 1 minus 3. Let's fix that. Alright. It's going to give me a negative times negative 4, which is positive 4. Well, I need my answer to be negative. That means that's not going to work. If I put 0 in for x, I'm going to get 0 plus 1, 0 minus 3, 1 times negative 3 is negative 3. Well, that's what we're looking for, is a negative number, so we're going to shade in between. I'm going to go ahead and tell you this much right now, this is not going to work, and you can verify that if you want to, but that's also not going to work. So my answer is just simply between the negative 1/2 and the positive 3, and they both have brackets. So we're kind of combining different things into one problem. Factoring, solving for x, shading the graph based on whether something is positive or negative.